Welcome everyone to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy and I am an alcoholic.
And I am Mick, and I'm also an alcoholic, serving as your secretaries today. Please join us for a few moments silence to remember the still suffering alcoholic, both inside and outside this meeting. And Robin is going to read the preamble.
Thanks, Mick. Hello, everyone. My name's Robin. I'm an alcoholic. Good to be sober. Good to be in a meeting. The preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thanks, Robin. A very warm welcome goes out to any newcomers or anyone returning to Alcoholics Anonymous.
The chat is now disabled until the end of the meeting, except for the meeting posts. If you feel the meeting security is at risk at any time during the meeting, please private message one of the co-hosts so they can check it out. And
that's it, folks. That's the introduction is done. As you know, this is our old-timers meeting. And today we have Bill the Shirt come to share with us. You're very welcome, Bill, and thanks for doing this for us. You have 40, 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Nobody will stop you talking. We'll see how long our patience and tolerance will last. How's that?
Wonderful. Okay, so my name's Bill and I'm an alcoholic, and thank you for Mossy for asking me. And it's a privilege to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, Mossy and Mr. Ferret there they said, oh, they're an alcoholic. Well, I'm a real alcoholic of our type. And you know, in the early days of AA, I was, you know, new around. I didn't know anything, and everybody would be talking about alcoholics of our type. Well, I can tell you now, my dad's an alcoholic. My granddad's an alcoholic. My sister died of drugs, but I've got 8 brothers and sisters who are all stone cold sober. And I just thought it was all about how much you drank. Now, I haven't got this tie on because I want to look pretty, although that probably does help. I've got this tie on because the group I got sober in Bristol, if you didn't have your tie on, if you didn't have a jacket on, if you weren't walking around with a big book, you didn't share. And my grand sponsor, Sally, who some of you may have heard of, she's long dead now. But I went to that group after 14 months in AA because everybody said, do not go to newcomers. And I did 14 months of a meeting every day. I didn't do anything anybody told me. And I went and bought a bottle of gin. Now, this here is probably the most important thing I'll show you tonight, because I had it drummed into me that you pick up the phone before you pick up a drink, because they said, we can't help you otherwise. And there I was with a litre of gin in my hand at 14 months sober. And the trouble is, I'd had a wonderful 14 months. I've loved every minute of it. I'd done international convention shares and then used to get a little tape with your name on. So I used to walk around with my little tape, Bill, international speaker. I was secretary of my home group. I could quote you out of the big book. People would ring me up for advice, but I wouldn't work the 12-step recovery program. And when I bought that bottle of gin one day, they say that there's only 2 dangerous feelings in AA. One when you're feeling down and depressed and angry and lonely, nobody understands. And the other is when you're feeling too good. And you know what? I'd been out in my Rolls Royce that day. I'd done some deals. I felt $1 million. And I put the winker on right to go home. But I went into the shop, turning left, and bought a bottle of gin. I had no defence, except I did pick up the phone before I picked up a drink. My wife's just gone up to feed my father-in-law in the next farm. And I've been with my wife 48 years. And when we were 6 months sober, this always makes me laugh, but I hope it isn't meant to be funny. When I was 6 months sober, she came down to hear me share for the first time. And we'd been together 21 years then. And we live in a lovely farm. We've got 5 children. Our daughters, and now our granddaughters, they all do show jumping. We had a lovely life and big cars. We had everything. Anyway, I was 6 months sober, and she came down to hear me share for the first time. And it was a big old meeting. And it was in Bristol, and we live about half an hour away outside of Bristol. And I did my share. And she didn't say anything. We got in the car, she didn't say anything. And I was just waiting for her to say, do you know what? That was the most wonderful thing in the world. Aren't you so brave to get up in front of all those people? She never said a word. And all the way home, she didn't say a word. And when we got home, I couldn't contain myself any longer. I said, what did you think of my share? She said, listen, it was the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard in my life. Most of the people you talk about don't exist. Most of the places you said we've been, we've never been there. So all I can say tonight is this is as Bill remembers it. If you want the truth, go and ask my wife. So I was born above an antique shop in London. My dad was an antique dealer to the stars. We used to have Greta Garbo in and Peter Sellers, all the big names. We had 4 shops, all high-end antiques and jewellery, and we would play with diamonds and jewels and coats of armour and sapphires. We would have sacks of gold lying around, sacks of silver, because that's how it was. It was the late 50s, early 60s. There was the 10 children. But my dad was also an alcoholic. And one night, my mum had had enough and scarpered in the middle of the night and drove us to Bristol, where my Jewish granny lived. And I say my Jewish granny because the war in the Ukraine, namely Odessa, is where we came from as a family. But my granddad got out of Russia, as it was then, and came to Bristol. And that's where I've lived ever since. So, you know, my first drink, I was 8 years old, and my brother was at Bristol University. And every year he would have these big student parties. It was about 1963, 64. It was all the summer of love. And we had this big house in Bristol. And there would probably be 200 or 300 students, and they were all having sex on the stairs and on the settee, and people were running around with flowers in their hair. All us children were dressed up as Jimi Hendrix, because that's how we lived, because my mum was the first hippie in Bristol. And cars would stop in the middle of the high street, because nobody had seen these long-haired boys with multicoloured clothes top to bottom. Anyway, I was at this party, and I remember sitting at the top of the stairs wanting to be a part of it, because that's been the story of my life. I just want to be a part of things, but I can't in case you laugh at me. And then I remembered my job every year was to decant all the homemade beer my brother made and put all the dregs in a couple of bottles and put it in the bin. And then I remembered these 2 bottles were in the bin, and I went and fished them out. And anybody who drinks the dregs of beer, you know it tastes disgusting. I fished them out and I drank the lot. And anybody who tastes the dregs, you should spit them out. And I know, for me, just this alcoholic, I know when I crossed that line between normal drinking and alcoholic drinking, it was between when I picked up that bottle and I took my first drink. And apparently I danced all night. I had a wonderful time. And afterwards, I was being projectile vomiting all over my bedroom. The room was going round, my head was thumping. My mum came in and said, oh my God, I've just left your father, and now I've got another one. And she had another alcoholic. And all I could think was, when can I do that again? And that was the start of my drinking. And I'll tell you what happened. I was 12 years old. I went to the big school, big grammar school, boys' school. There were 600 boys there. And the night before I went, I was dressed up in my brother's uniform. And my brother left that year. He was 16. And I was dressed up in his uniform. And it was turn up the sleeves, turn up my trousers. It was, you'll grow into it. And to add insult to injury, my mum bought a pair of policeman's shoes because she said they'd last me longer. And I literally plodded up to school on my first day with 599 boys in beautiful new clothes and me looking like I was dressed coming out of a skip. And you know, they say there's sensitive people in this world, and then ultra sensitive, and then mega sensitive, and then there's the alcoholic. And I just died. And I just sat at the back with all these smartly dressed boys and me, and it was a very posh school. And that summer holidays, we broke up. I was probably 13 by then. And my friend John, he said, "Do you want to come down for a drink?" And we lived near the centre of Bristol. We just dropped down over the hill. It's only 10 minutes. And he took me into one of those little crowded bars. It was full of smoke. And as I went in with my school uniform on, my long blonde hair, a bloke said to me, "Do you want a drink?" And I said, "Well, I'll have what my dad drinks," which is a whiskey, double whiskey with 2 lumps of ice. And I drank it straight down, and he said, "Do you want another one?" I said, "I think I do." And I came out of that pub, and you know when you walk out of a pub and the fresh air hits you and your head spins and you go all wobbly, well, I came out of there as pissed as a mattress, and it was wonderful. And I went back there every day that summer holidays, because my friends were doing this very strange thing of going down the park, sitting in a circle and passing a bottle around. Well, I could go down to this pub and drink a bottle of whiskey every day. And after a couple of weeks, someone said to me, you know this pub you're going in, it's a gay pub. And that's why all the men are buying you drinks. And I said, "Do you know what? I couldn't care whether it was Pluto. I can go in there and drink all night." And at the end of that summer holidays, I started off as Billy No Mates, looking like I'd wearing a tent with my policeman's shoes. And I went back to school with Elton John Stack shoes. I had fluorescent blue David Bowie haircut. I had a girlfriend on my arm. I had the biggest tie knot. I had stay pressed clothes. And they stood me on the table in front of 600 boys and said, "Whatever's happened to him? 6 weeks ago, he was this shy, retiring little alcoholic. And he's come back as a cross between Elton John and David Bowie." And I remember standing there like Bill W. does in his story, with my arms out wide, thinking, I have arrived. And I know what had happened to me. It was very simple. It was called whiskey. And it took away my inhibitions. It took away my loneliness. It took away, that terrible fear. If anybody said anything, if the teacher told me off, if anybody laughed at me, I would lie awake until it was light in the morning with fear, because my whole world was consumed about what you thought about me, and even worse, what you didn't think about me. And I spent my life working out if people liked me or not. And that whiskey, that summer holiday, took it away. Well, needless to say, my very first consequence of my drinking was about 2 weeks after I got back from school, and I heard about a party that my friends were having at school that I was not invited in to. I knew exactly what it was. I'd been round their house a couple of weeks before. I think I'd pissed in the wardrobe or tried to run off with his mum or something. I don't know what I did. But do you know what? That was the start of another 30 years of being rejected, 30 years of being uninvited, 30 years of not being wanted. Because it was always, "Bill, you're a lovely chap until you take a drink, and then we don't know what's going to happen." And I was only 13, and that hit me really hard, not being invited to that party. But my reaction was, "Well, you can go sod off, you lot. I'll find people who drink better than you." And I remember I was 14 and a half. I was in a pub with a speed dealer. I wasn't on speed, but he was a speed dealer. He had a big bookies in Bristol that I used to run for, and we met some Hells Angels. Remember it like it was yesterday. And I thought, you are my lot. Because these people, you could have 3 fights, be sick 4 times, fall over, knock out your teeth. You could get drunk, you could sober up, all in an evening, and nothing was said. And it was heaven, because all my friends, it was, "Don't you think you drink a bit too much? Can't you just slow down? Why are you slurring your words?" And these boys, there was no limits. And I'm an all or nothing person. And I'd found my lot. And for the next 2 years, oh, I just loved every minute of it, except when I used to wake up in the morning. I think, my God, what did we do last night? And there was guns involved, there was knives involved. We used to play chicken, which involved trying to kill people. But you put a drink or a drug in me, and all my inhibitions go out the window. Any sense of normality, any sense of right or wrong, good or bad, just goes out the window. And I think we're having fun. But in the morning, I'd wake up and think, Bill, you're 15. And if there's a knock on that door, it could well be the police and you could go to prison for the rest of your life. And I had many, many, many days of that. And then I think, well, you know, I just had one drink to calm me down. And I'm the alcoholic of our type that when I drink, I can't stop. And that night I'm back out with them again. It was just madness. It was madness. I'm going to roll on because in that gay bar, I met my wife. And as I say, we've been together 48 years. And we built a business. We got an investment company. We got 5 children. We got 20 grandchildren now. And when we came to AA, we lived in this lovely farmhouse, which I put polythene over the windows because my wife's quite a nasty piece of work. Because she used to, yeah, she was nasty, yeah. She used to say some dreadful things to me like, you're not having another one, are you? Or can't you just go for 2 or 3 hours without a drink? Or why do you have to drink like that? And you can say anything about anything, but do not criticize my drinking. And quite often we've got a little cottage on the farm. Nancy was in years ago. And one night, about 2 years before I stopped drinking, Nancy came round to my wife and said, Bill will be on one tonight then. And she said, why is that? She said, don't you realise every full moon he goes on a massive bender? And do you know what? For the last 2 years of my drinking, every full moon my drinking would skyrocket. And I would sit up all night. I was probably on gin by then, and I would put Leonard Cohen on full blast, Bird on the Wire. I'd be singing at the top of my voice, and my wife would come down 4 in the morning and say, can we just turn it down a bit? The children have got to be up for school, or we got show jumping in the morning. And I'd turn the music down. And then I think, who the bloody hell does she think she is telling me what I can and can't do? And I'd stumble upstairs with a bottle of gin, saying, come here, Geraldine, what's all this? I can't even have a drink now, can I? She said, Bill, it's 4 in the morning. Can we just drop it now? Ah, I know what it is. You don't love me anymore. And I'll bloody show you. I'm leaving you and I'm never coming back. And I'd be stumbling around with me carrier bags, putting my knickers in and putting this in. And I'd say, if I walk out that door, I'm never coming back. And she opened the door and I walked out because I don't back down on anything. But do you know what? Then she slammed the door behind me. And there I was out in the yard. It's snowing. And I spent another year another night in the barn. And I used to go in the morning and my head would be thumping. I'd had 4 hours sleep and everybody was tiptoeing around me. The place was like Beirut because I'd broken windows. I'd done this. I don't know. And you know, all she asked me was to turn the music down. And then Cyril in my home group, he's dead now, but his claim to fame that he was the last person in England that was jailed for cattle rustling. And in my very first birthday card, on my first AA birthday, he wrote in that card, and I've still got it, happy birthday, Bill, keep keeping out of the barn. And do you know what? In that first year of AA was the first year we'd been in that farm. We'd been there 20 years then. And I didn't feel the need to sleep in the barn. So I'm going to roll on now. It was the 6th of October, 97. And my wife had been to AA a couple of years before and said, what can we do with him? And they said, there's nothing we can do. But if he's ever ready, give him our number. And I woke up on the 6th of October, 97. I don't know what happened, why it happened that day, but I know that day I was given a gift. And it was a gift of a rock bottom that was painful enough. So for the first time in my life, I admitted complete defeat. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 8 o'clock. We were getting ready and get the children off to school. And I just said to her, I can't do this drinking anymore. And as quietly as anything, there'd be no fighting, there'd be no arguments. She walked over to the sideboard, picked up that piece of paper that AA gave her and said, there's your number. And I said, what's that for? She said, that's for Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, who have you been talking to? And they said, well, she said, I went to see them 2 years ago, and they said, if you're ever ready, give them this number. But in the meantime, and this is what saved my life, whoever saw her, and I still don't know what it is, who it was to this day, they told us something that saved my life and saved our marriage and saved everything. They said, if you've got any chance with him whatsoever, until he rings AA, make him responsible for the consequences of his actions. And for that last 2 years, she wouldn't do anything for me. She used to leave me on the stairs with no clothes on. The children would climb over me going to school. She'd leave me in the yard. She wouldn't pick up my clothes. She wouldn't lie for me. She didn't give me any money. She didn't pick me up. She did nothing. And I thought, you bitch, after all I've done for you in my life. And she was in my filing cabinet marked, where would you be without me? And do you know what? I was so angry. But that morning, when I phoned AA, was the first time in my life that I knew that lovely saying that the guy from LA used to tell us years ago, there was no friendly direction left. And my wife was the only person in the world left for me, and she'd given up. And the dear guy from LA, he used to say, you know, there's no friendly direction left. And I know what he means now, because there was nowhere else for me to go. It was either die, because I was yellow, I was 7 stone, I'd knocked out my teeth, I looked like a tramp, or it was go and ask for help. And it was down to me then. Thank God she stuck to it for 2 years. And I rang AA. And down this part of the world, some of you may know it, there's a Glastonbury, and that's where all the druids go. And on top of Glastonbury Tor, there's a druid, and he's got funny hair and a beard down here and cloak, and he drums a drum, lives in a teepee, and he hums. And he was the guy who answered the phone. Now in AA, we talk about we mix with people that we wouldn't normally mix with. I've got nothing in common with tree huggers, people who hum to the moon, people who sing and dance on the summer solstice. But that guy said to me, I'll see you in my office in an hour. And I drove into Bristol. I was 2 hours sober, and I walked in and I thought, oh my God, there's Jesus, because he looks like Jesus. And I walked in that room and I said, I'll do anything you want me to do to stop drinking, because I'd been told 22 years earlier to go to AA. And I said, I'll do anything to stop drinking, but don't you ever ask me to be nice to my dad. And I sat with that guy for an hour, and we talk about spiritual experiences and spiritual awakenings. I didn't know what they were. I know today that I had my first spiritual experience in that room, because all of spiritual experiences is a change within me. And something happened to me in that room. And I left after an hour knowing that I didn't drink again. And that was my first spiritual experience. But in that hour, I'm going to tell you what happened, because it changed my life. He said, listen, Bill, all the Hell's Angels, the fighting, the girlfriends throwing you out, the drink, the drugs, the low self-worth, the things, the horrible things that have happened to you, you're feeling that you're just the worst person in the world, the beatings from your dad, everything was a gift from your higher power, so that you could sit in front of me this morning, because one less drink, one less beating, one less upset, you wouldn't have got down low enough. And whilst I'm not pleased at what went on, and my daughters live in the farm here, and I remember them as little girls crying in the corner saying, please, Daddy, will you stop smashing the house up? And please, Daddy, will you stop making Mummy cry? I'm not pleased with that, but I do know that nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. And Jack Brennan, if you haven't heard of him, listen to him, because he said, you know, everybody in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the chosen few. And the other thing he told me that morning, you know, Bill, all your life you've worn a cloak, and it's a cloak that's tailor-made for you. You feel comfortable, you feel strong, you feel capable, but it's a cloak of alcoholism, it's a cloak of anger, of resentment and fear and loneliness and depression and retaliation, and it's a cloak you've worn all your life, and you have survived in that cloak. But his exact words that morning were, I'm going to beg you please to take that cloak off, and I'm going to offer you a new cloak, but this new cloak, you will feel a twat in it. It won't fit you very well. You will feel awkward, you will feel stupid, you'll feel uncomfortable, because it's a cloak of the 12-step recovery program. It's a cloak of willingness and harmony, humility and surrender and acceptance. And I'm begging you please to try this new cloak on. And that's what I've been doing for 28 years, trying to wear that new cloak. And I walked out of that room, as I say, knowing that I didn't drink again. And I went hopping and skipping down the road, because it was like someone gave me a key to my prison cell and said, now you can get out and enjoy the world. And that was exactly how I felt that morning. And he sent me home with 4 things to do. He said, you need to go to the supermarket and buy lots of orange juice and sugar, because you have seriously got to get some goodness in you, because I was yellow, I was so thin. So I went up and bought a van full of orange juice and sugar. And I went home and my wife said, what did those A&A people tell you? And I said, well, those A&A people tell me apparently I smell and I got to have a wash. Would you believe it? She said, I don't believe it. I've been asking you to have a wash for weeks. So I had a shower. She said, what else have those A&A people told you? And I said, well, I've got to have something to eat. And it was probably 11, 12 o'clock then, and I had a bowl of cornflakes. And I just brought it straight up. I couldn't keep any food down. She said, well, what else have those A&A people told you? And I said, well, I've told them that you don't do anything. And apparently, Geraldine, I have got to go upstairs and pick up all my own clothes off the floor. She said, I don't bloody believe this. Sorry to swear. You go off and see these A&A people. You come home. You have a wash, you have something to eat, you're tidying the house up. What have they got over you? And you know what? It was the start of my sobriety. That is one alcoholic talking to another to reduce my feelings of special indifference for just long enough so that I'll take actions that I wouldn't take for anybody else. And I went upstairs and I was picking up all my clothes off the floor, because she wouldn't do it, because she was told not to. And I thought, how does the druid know my clothes are on the floor? He's never been here. And if you're a real alcoholic of our time, everything is bedlam, or everything's hung up, colour-coded, including me knickers. And I had to phone him every day and say, Adrian, I've picked my clothes up off the floor. And that was my first lesson in sobriety. So by the end of that morning, by 12 o'clock, because he'd said to me when he was talking to me, I'm going to pass on the power to you that is stronger than the power of your alcoholism. And if you want to keep it, go and help another alcoholic. So by 12 o'clock that day, I was doing my step 1, that I'd found a power over and above the strength of the power of my alcoholism. And the unmanageability part of my life was getting manageable, because I was having the wash, having something to eat and tidying my house up. And that's when the fun started. And I arrived at my first meeting in a stretched Rolls Royce, walked in, and you know when you go to your first meeting, you do look a twat. And I stood there and someone said, oh, can I help? And I said, oh, it's my first meeting. And they said, come and sit by me. You never have to drink again. Best door you ever walked through. I'll ring you in the morning. Here's a big book and read it. All of that. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? Nobody's been nice to me for years. And I went back the next month, the next week, like the returning hero, and opened the door, and I was waiting for everybody to welcome me. Nobody said anything because they were all helping somebody else. And that was the very first saying I heard in LA, that when people treated me extra special, I felt ordinary, but when they treated me ordinary, I felt rejected. And when I heard that saying, it hit me like a bolt, because that was the story of my life. And I joined the Hannam group. And the guy who started my group, John Lennon, he's a short Irish boxer. And my God, I hated that bloke with a passion, because he told me the truth and he gave me something that nobody has ever given me, and that's tough love. And he used to every week say to me, Billy, if you don't work these steps, you'll drink again. I said, listen, John, I've got a Rolls Royce outside. I probably pay more in taxes than you earn. Do you know who I am? And, you know, we were told the one thing that would kill more alcoholics than everything else. And I thought, well, it's probably vodka. And he said, no, it isn't. It's my case is different and you don't understand. And when I heard that, that was the story of my life. I thought I was special and different. Nobody had been through what I'd been through, and nobody would understand. And I came to an AA, and my case isn't different, and everybody did understand. And, you know, after about 6 weeks, John came up to me and gave me the key for the tea cupboard. Now, we've got 2 key safes here for the investment company. And I had this little key for the tea cupboard. Oh, I treasured that. And I went in the first week and they say, right, this is how you make the tea. And I make tea at home all the time. But in an AA meeting, it's like a North Korean route march. And they, right, this is how you make the tea. You put 8 tea bags in and stir it, and you do this and you do that. So I went in to make the tea. I didn't put 8 tea bags in. I put 16 because my tea was going to be the best in the world. And Bob, who used to make the tea before me, came in and tasted my tea and he said, it's not as good as my tea. And I thought, you want war? You have war. So the next week I got in 22 tea bags. That are full, yeah. Gave it an extra stir. He came in, he said, still not as good as my tea. And I sat through that meeting. I went home. I phoned John Lennon, 10 o'clock that night, and I said, can I have a word with you? And he said, is everything right? It's 10 o'clock at night. I said, everything is all right, John, but I'm leaving the group. He said, whatever for? You're doing so well. You're like 8 weeks sober. You're doing so well. And I said, but Bob criticises my tea. And it's just not fair. I've done nothing to hurt him. And good old John, he gave me some advice that day that saved my bacon in AA. He said, Billy, if this isn't the best group in the world, then you come back and make it the best group in the world. And next week you go up to Bob and tell him he's a twat and you can't stand him. And I walked in and I said, Bob, can I have a word with you? And I can't stand you. And it's just not fair the way you treat me. And me and Bob were friends for 25 years when he died sober a couple of years ago. And that was the first resentment I've ever dealt with in my life without storming out, slamming the door, because it works if you work it. And I had those wonderful people behind me to give me some good, orderly direction. Now, as I say, at 14 months sober, I went and bought a bottle of gin because I wouldn't work the steps. And everybody said, don't go to the Druids group, newcomers. And I thought I'd been to every other meeting and I'm going to die. I had this bottle of gin. So I went to newcomers and you wore a tie and you wore a jacket. And my grand sponsor, Sally and Travis, and I think Travis was sponsored by Sackville, who was sponsored by Bill W. And I needed some strictness. I needed to be taught respect. I needed to be taught, you either do this program properly or you're going to die. And our sister group in LA, the Pacific Group, we used to go over there with Clancy. And in that meeting in LA, which the night I was there, when I was about a year sober, I think there was 1,600 people in that one meeting. But they said, and it's a very strong AA meeting, and they say, this is a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're glad you're all here, the Pacific Group of LA. But we're here for anybody who puts anything into their body that affects them from the neck up. And I haven't had a drink then for a year. I haven't had a drink now for it won't be 28 years in a couple of weeks' time. But if someone looks at me funny, or I'm late, or red traffic lights, or someone criticises me, that affects me from the neck up. And that's why I have to keep coming back to AA. So I did work through a 12-step recovery program, and those little wonderful nuggets that I heard, happiness happens when results exceed expectations. And today I keep my expectations down to a minimum. I have a plan every day. I had a plan to come on here, but they're not expectations. And so if things don't happen, they're not beyond my expectations, and I won't get sad and angry. And all this one day at a time business, I can't deal with that. So what I do, and I've done it for 28 years, I have little 20-minute boxes, and I put all my day into 20-minute boxes. So I get up, I open my little 20-minute box to get dressed, shut that, another little 20-minute box, have breakfast, and I can cope with 20 minutes at a time. If my wife wants something done, I shut the box that I'm doing and open another box, and it's called keeping it simple. Over in LA, he used to say to us, you know, sobriety is sprinkled like stardust on the just and the unjust, the tall and the short, the rich and the poor, the black and the white. Some people are gifted with a little bit of that sobriety stardust. And I got a little bit of that on the 6th of October, 97. And I tell you now, I look after my sobriety stardust, that little sprinkling I got that morning, like a fine porcelain vase. I look after it every day. I make sure it's safe. I nurture it. Because I know what happens to gifts, and I was given a gift that morning. I came to AA. I know what happens to gifts if you don't look after them or you put them in the bottom drawer, eventually they get thrown out. And I don't know if I've got another chance of this. I really, really do not know if I've got another chance. I'm just going to tell you, I shared at the World Convention in Atlanta, and I was sharing over in Vancouver a few weeks ago. I don't know if you can see this, some of you may not have seen this, but it's called Loners International Meetings. And I've been a loner for 27 years. So Loners International was set up by Bill W. and someone on an oil tanker who couldn't go to meetings. And it's pre the internet back in the 60s. And Loners was set up for people who can't go to meetings. And I was sharing at the Australian convention, I was a year or two sober, and a girl called Jutta from Germany said to me in Sydney, Australia, could I do some service for loners in England? And I phoned up Loners International, and I've been a PC, which is a port contact, for I think 26 years now, I suppose. So my job in the UK I'm a seafaring loner. So anybody who comes into a port in the UK, I'm their contact, and that's a job I've been doing for 26 years. So every 4 weeks we send in our shares, and this is called a meeting in print. There's about 8 or 10 pages, and it starts with the preamble and ends with the Serenity Prayer, and we have to agree to have our names and addresses put in there. And then we still use things called envelopes and stamps, and then people write to me and we sponsor them and this, that, and the other. So that's one of my little bits of service I've done over the years. Anyway, I was going over to share for loners in Atlanta. It was 10 years ago. And I was on the QE2, and there's meetings on the ships every day. And I was in the meeting on the QE2, whinging about my mum. I was 17 years sober then. How she didn't love me, how she didn't treat my children properly, nor my grandchildren. And this guy came up to me after the meeting and he said, you know, Bill, this anger and resentment that you've got towards your mum, just remember this. And I said, what is it? He said, acceptance doesn't necessarily have to mean approval. And you know what? I don't know why I was bobbing around in a meeting in the middle of the Atlantic, and I listened to that guy and I thought, that's my problem. Because I don't approve of her, I will never accept her because I'm an alcoholic of our type. I'm not going to lower my standards. And I came home and I said to my sponsor, I think I can deal with my mum now. And we did a whole 12-step program on my mum. And step 1 was, you know, I'm powerless over my mum and she makes my life unmanageable. And step 2, I need to find a power stronger than the power she has over me to push all my buttons. And step 3, I need to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. And when we do our step 3, when we turn our will over, our will is our thoughts, and our thoughts are our prayers. So when I'm doing my day, because I'm thinking all day, I'm praying all day, so therefore I have a conscious contact. And we work through the steps. I did a massive step 4 and 5. And when we got to step 11, I always remember he said, I want you to kneel and pray for your mother now. And I said, listen, mate, I'm not that well. I don't think I can pray for her. But in the big book, it says, if you pray for someone for 2 weeks, everything that you would want for yourself, for them, the resentment would go. And I've not been well enough to do that. He sent me a prayer on my phone, and I had to read that prayer every time I thought of my mum, which was probably 10 times a day. And the prayer went something like that. It said, dear God, would you please help me now at 17 years sober to please try and get rid of this anger and resentment and bitterness I have towards my mum. And she's in a nursing home now. And please help us as mother and son to have the last years of her life with some kind of harmony and love and tolerance and peace. And I said that prayer over and over and over again. And on October the 24th that year, that was 10 years ago, it was her 90th birthday, and we took her up her flowers, because we used to go up every birthday, every Mother's Day, Christmas. And I took her in a bunch of flowers on her 90th, that was 10 years ago. And that's the very first time I've ever been in the same room as my mum without a resentment. And at the end of chapter 5, we have the 3 pertinent ideas that I am an alcoholic, that I cannot run my own life. I wish I could. And probably no human power, especially the Druid, can't help me. But God could and would if he was sought. And if there's anybody on here with an angst towards a mum or a dad or an old friend, I waited 17 years for ask my higher power for help. And do you know what? Within 3 weeks, it was gone. And she died last year at 98. And I had the last 8 years of her life without any resentments towards her, because I used that prayer and meditation. And when we got to step 11 with the Druid, I'm going to tell you this little story. I think I've got about 3 hours left. So I thought when the Druid floats in and out of meetings with his cloaks, Tina's on there, she knows him, and he floats in and out, and everybody says, oh, can I touch the hem of your garment? And I thought, well, when he takes me through step 11, I will float in and out of meetings and people will say, oh, you can see how well Bill is. And he told me something that day that I'm going to tell you. He said, Bill, I can't take you through step 11. I can't take you through prayer and meditation. You can't have my God. You can't have my God of my understanding. You can't have my spiritual journey. You can't have the journey that I'm on. That's the journey you have to go and find yourself. Thank God he told me that. And I took myself off to step 3 and 11 retreats, which I ran for many years. And me and Tina, who are on there now, we do step 3 and 11 workshops. And the one thing I wanted all my life was that 4th dimension, where I was promised if I found the 4th dimension, I could sit by myself, doing absolutely nothing, and be at perfect peace with the world. And it took years and years and years, but I wanted it more than anything in the world. And if there's any newcomers on here, the only bit of advice I'd probably give you is don't ever try and rise above being a human being, because you look like a twat in AA, because we can see through everybody like they saw through me. Don't try and be anybody that you're not. And most importantly, don't try and be some spiritual guru that I tried and I looked an even bigger twat. It's all about me finding that little boy who arrived in Bristol in 1960, a 4-year-old, and finding that little boy and letting him grow into a human being, and letting him grow into a person that doesn't need to drink. And as my third grand sponsor said, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous gave me a life that befits a human being. And you know what? After 28 years, I'm just about coming out of kindergarten, and I'm going to go up to Place Big School next. I've taken me nappies off, and I'm off my tricycle, and oh, it's just wonderful. And I'm going to finish on this, Mozzie, because I know he wants me to shut up. You know, when you come to AA and those old timers and they say to you, you can't love anybody else before you love yourself. And then they say, do you know what? I got up this morning and saw the lovely blue sky and the daffodils and the green grass. And you think, listen, mate, go to the back of the room with your cocoa and just shut up. I don't want that crap. And do you know, after a few years, I walked into a meeting and I thought, do you know, I am starting to love me. And I looked out this morning and I thought, oh, isn't that a lovely blue sky out there? And so if these old timers piss you off, they're saying it for your own good. I don't know if there's anybody on here. I know Mick might know this. I've got this out. It's called Bristol Fashion. And it was a magazine that my group did for probably 30 or 40 years. And only the old timers who were connected have some connection with Sally and Travis. They used to get the Bristol Fashion. It's not going around anymore, but that's a little magazine. So I'm going to just say thank you for listening. And through that prayer and meditation, I learnt this from Jack Brennan. He said, I meet my God in the morning when my day is at its best, and glory comes like sunshine deep down in my chest. So I think I know the answer to many a troubled way. If I seek my higher power in the morning, I think I can keep him all the day. Thank you, Mozzie. God bless to you.
Thanks, Bill. You never told us why they call you Bill the Shirt, by the way.
Do you want to hear it? It'll only take a minute. When I was about 6 months sober, I used to walk into meetings and nobody was good enough for me. Everybody was a twat. Everybody had silly haircuts and silly shoes. And I used to storm out thinking, I'm not bloody going back there again. And nobody likes me. And someone laughed at my Rolls Royce. And the Druid phoned me one day and he said, listen, Bill, you've done everything that you've done in your drinking. Anybody upsets you, just storm out. You know, the two things you've got in your life, Bill, a criticism and public humiliation that you can't deal with. So I want you to go and buy 2 Hawaiian shirts. So I got these Hawaiian shirts, and he's a big bloke, so we bought these triple extra large Hawaiian shirts. And I phoned in the next day, being the best sponsor in the world, and I said, Adrian, I've got these shirts for you, mate. He said, they're not for me. And I said, well, who might they be for then? He said, they're for you. And I said, but what would I want with a Hawaiian shirt? I'm a property developer. He said, you are going to wear those Hawaiian shirts to every meeting you go to from now on. And so until you can get over this sensitivity to what the whole world thinks about you. And if you think it's funny walking into a meeting with triple extra large Hawaiian shirts looking like I'm wearing a tent, and people say, oh, here's sensitive Bill. Oh, Bill does anything his sponsor. Bill, we've got curtains like that at home. Oh, Bill, that's just like our wallpaper. I wore those shirts for 300 meetings for 9 months every day. And it was the most painful 9 months of my life to be publicly humiliated every day. And after 9 months, Big Chris, he's dead now, he laughed at me. And I thought, oh my God, I'm 42. That's the first time since I was that 4-year-old that arrived in Bristol that somebody's publicly humiliated me, and it didn't hurt. And I phoned up my sponsor. He said, you can take those shirts off now. And that's when the promises came true, where I would know how to deal with situations that used to baffle me. And I did the one thing in that 9 months that dear old Clancy used to say to us: don't give up until the miracle of a new life happens. There we are, Mossy.
Thank you. Lovely. Bill, I'm so glad you came and joined us today. I'm so glad to get to know you better. And again, I got so much identification with your story that I was thinking, well, I mentioned that and that. Now my head is melted after you. Because I had no self-worth. I was dragged up that way. I had no confidence. I couldn't look people in the eye. I had no friends. I struggled in school. I struggled everywhere. So I became whatever you wanted me to be. If I was with you, I'd be wearing Hawaiian shirts. If I was with Mick, I'd be choking the head of ferrets. And I'm saying that laughing now, but I became a nasty piece of work just because I had to do it to be to be liked, I suppose. And at the end of the day, I drank and drug because I hated me. And I got sober hating me. And when you mentioned, you know, loving yourself, I'll tell you this much, I fucking love Mossy today. And it's not my ego talking, but I look in the mirror and I see a nice guy, honest, caring. And I could never say that. I could never say anything nice about myself. But if I was doing an inventory of Mossy today, nice or nasty, nice wins out. And it's because of this fellowship. And it's because I done exactly as I was told. And I was bullied into the program. I wasn't cuddled into it and, you know, loved into it. I was bullied into the program. But I was promised a life beyond my wildest dreams if I'd done what I was told. I've learned how to love people and how to share that love and share the bit of laughter. I learned how to be a father, how to be a son. And I learned how to be a husband. I learned how to be a friend. Because of people like you coming and sharing their stories like that to us. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I absolutely love being sober. And I'm glad I was bullied into this. That's it for me. You've moved me again, Bill, and I thank you for that. And I've come to a stage in my life where I don't care what people think of me. I just do what I want to do when I want to do it. And, you know, I have a beautiful life as a result. Mick.
Thanks, Mossy. My name's Mick and I am an alcoholic, and by the grace of God, this fellowship, I don't need to take a drink. Bill, I never knew I had so much identification with you, you know, because I had hand-me-downs as children, you know, and everything. And if you walk into my kitchen now and press the button on the tape recorder and that, Jack Brennan. I was brought up on Jack Brennan and Father Martin. And I forget what you call it, memory box, I've got Stay Well, Mick, Father Martin. Because I came down and I think it was Bristol that he shared at, and I came down there, and Clancy, and I've heard him, and you know, and Travis, yes, you know, and you know, and where you shared, you went into a meeting and you've left and you've never needed to take a drink since. That's exactly the same as me. I don't think to myself, will I ever drink again? Because, you know, because I might not be a recovery. I don't think that today, because I know by working this program one day at a time, 10 minutes at a time sometimes, you know, and I have a routine, and I'll tell you what my routine is. When I wake up, I thank God because I woke up. Then I do me prayers, and then I do me meditation. And then I walk with my dog, because I'm a tree hugger. I love trees, and because my God is the great outdoors. It has no shape, has no colour. It's just the beauty of whatever's out there. And that's what I've learned in this fellowship. Everybody can have a God of their understanding. But I still keep the one, or just one behind, just in case, you know. And I've been given a beautiful life through this fellowship, you know. And, you know, it is the now. If we live in the now, how can we go wrong? You know, and I was very lucky with my second sponsor, Jack of Slough. He wouldn't let get away with nothing, nothing at all. Like your Druid friend, he was like him, you know. And, you know, and I knocked around with the Angels, the chapter in Windsor. And I think half of my false toughness was to keep people from trying to look inside me. I truly believe that. Because like you said, you had to go back right as a child to find out what was wrong with you. Drugs and alcohol was the solution to keeping me kind of calm. AA has shown me who I am inside, what I am inside, and I try to practice that on a daily basis, and it works for me. Thank you, Bill.
I'd like to thank Kathleen for doing time and Robin for doing the preamble. Thanking John ahead of time for doing the promises. All the other co-hosts, and a big thanks to Bill for sharing for us today. And that's it for me, Mick.
Yeah, we have a meeting on 7 days a week at 8:30 a.m. UK time. We also have a lunchtime meeting every Sunday at 1 p.m. UK time. This is a meditation meeting. And now you, Mossy.
And on Saturdays at 6 o'clock, of course, we have the Old Timers meeting, an extended chair recorder for the archives. And on Thursday, we have a meeting at 7:30 p.m. UK time. We use the same meeting code for all our meetings.
Stick around for fellowship after the meeting. If you want a breakout room after the meeting, please let the host know.
And the yellow card, who you see here?
What you hear here,
When you leave here?
let it stay here.
That's
And
it, guys.
And the promises we read by John.
Oh, yes, indeed. John, do you want me to put up the promises?
Yes, please, in big letters.
Okay, we'll make it as big as we can for you. How's that?
That's just about right. Yeah, the 12-step promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled amongst us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we wait for them.
Thank you very much. That's it, guys. That's a wrap. Bill, thanks a million for sharing with us. Fantastic share. And will you lead us out with this surrender prayer, Bill?
Yeah. Thanks for what everyone said. Tim, if you stay on after and give me your number, I've got a load of very old photographs of Sally and Travis that you might like. So, yeah. So will you join me in the serenity prayer? God.
And first for serenity, to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know different. Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, guys. Love you all. See you in the morning. Love you.
Thank you so much.